So let's summarize our main idea of this topic. To solve a quadratic equation by completing the square, first, manipulate the equation so that one side will look like x squared plus bx. The squared variable has to have a coefficient of 1. Second, we're going to add 1/2 b, quantity squared, to both sides of the equation. Third, we're going to then factor that perfect square trinomial into the form x plus 1/2 b, quantity squared. And then finally, we're going to finish by solving our equation using the square root property. I'm now going to work through several exercises with you to demonstrate how to complete the square on a quadratic equation. Example 1. Solve each quadratic equation by completing the square. Example 1a. X squared plus 10x minus 4 equals 0. Alright, our first step in completing the square on a quadratic equation is to isolate the x terms on the left. In other words, our first step will be to move any constant from the left side to the right side. In this case, we need to add 4 to both sides of our equation so that we can get rid of the minus 4 on the left side and move it to the right. This will isolate our two x terms, or two terms that have the variable x in them. X squared plus 10x. The minus 4 and plus 4 cancels, and that gives us on the right side 0 plus 4, which is 4. So that completes the first step. The second step is to add a blank to both sides of our equation. X squared plus 10x plus blank equals 4 plus blank. This sets us up for our third step. We want to rewrite the left side of our equation as a perfect square trinomial. In other words, we have to figure out what we would put in the blank to make this a perfect square trinomial. How do we do that? We take half of the middle coefficient. In other words, we're going to take half of 10. And half of 10 is the number 5. What goes in the blank isn't 5, but instead, remember, it's 5 squared. In other words, what goes in the blank is 25. Whatever we add to the left side of an equation, we must also add to the right side of an equation, so we add 25 to the right and put it in that blank as well. Now, our fourth step is to factor this left side. Because it is now written as a perfect square trinomial, we can factor it as a binomial square, and this is very easy. We simply take that number right here that we took half of 10 to get. That number, our magic number, is 5, and that's what goes in our blank here. X plus 5 quantity squared gives us x squared plus 10x plus 25. After you factor the left, you want to simplify the right. 4 plus 25 is simply 29. And now we're ready to finish solving by using the square root property. We have a quantity squared equals some value, a positive value k. How do we solve this type of equation? Well, let's recall from the previous topic that to solve a quantity squared equals k, we simply take the object inside the quantity, which is x plus 5, and set it equal to both the positive and negative square root of 29. In other words, x plus 5 is either plus or minus the square root of 29. We finish solving our equation by getting rid of this constant term and isolating x. That is, we want to subtract 5 from both the left and the right. And remember, we put it in front of the plus or minus, and so that gives us that x is negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 29. Wonderful. See, that wasn't too bad. That tells us there are two solutions to this quadratic equation, x squared plus 10x minus 4. Those two solutions are simply the numbers negative 5 plus the square root of 29 and negative 5 minus the square root of 29. That's how we solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. We're now going to take a look at several more examples.